Nicky boy.
Billy.
I feel like saying third time is the charm.
You know, we do like numbers on our podcast.
We do.
We like numbers, and I've got my keys around my neck still because I was working.
I'll put them right over here.
I was working this morning setting up my wife's classroom. I set up my office, back to school.
Teacher life. Yeah, well, so we did a thing last week.
We did do a thing.
We went to Letchworth Village.
We were like dungeon explorers and demon hunters all at once. You
know what I learned from doing that video? Cut down on some of the pointless stuff. That was the only criticism that I got, which you could see here on the Say What Again Billy podcast YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fairly decent. There wasn't too many pointless things. I mean, we had a couple of repeat. It looks like repeat, but it's not repeat because it's different locations within that location.
Well, I'll tell you this much. By the way, these new mics ought to go. I have nothing to say until after this is recorded. But anyways, I'll tell you this. The last part of the video, that's where we got the bread and butter. But we're here today to tell people, because we touched on it in our little pre-shoot episode, which was a test of video podcasting second time around. This should be our first official video, because now we have the mics.
Right, so that should be a cast for the episode. And it's not a preview, it's an actual discussion.
Right. So we touched on some of the history of Letchworth Village, and I wanted you to use your Nick Snokes live on TV, well, YouTube, to...
Close enough to live on TV.
Pretty much. To go through some of the history that people need to know, which led to the ending of Letchworth Village and all the ghost stories that ensued after that.
Okay, fair enough, but we have to start at the beginning if we're going to get to the ending.
Let's go.
So... William Pryor Letchworth, he was born in 1823, he dies in 1909. He was raised as a Quaker. He is the man whose name is on Letchworth Village. He had a huge value on hard work, charity, and intellect. He was an apprentice at a company by 15. He owned and was partner in his own business by the age of 22. In 1873, he's appointed to the New York State Board of Charities. And at 1878, he becomes the president. And he remains the president until his resignation in 1897. So almost 20 years as the president of the New York State Board of Charities. Serves as the president also during this time as the National Association for the Study of Epilepsy and the Care of Treatment of Epilepsy. He was the president of the first New York State Conference of Charities and Corrections. He was also the president of the National Conference of Charities and Corrections, held in 1884 in St. Louis.
Sounds like he cares.
He did. So much so, really, that on his own dime, after he's done, resigned, being president of all these things, goes to Europe and travels around the rest of the United States, again, on his own dollar, to explore the treatment and the condition of the insane, the epileptics, and the poor children of our nation and European countries. So what he gets from this charity and his dedication here is he doesn't like the conditions. Okay, most conditions at the time, you basically think of a big old apartment building, like a big skyrise, and they were just shoved in every apartment, floor after floor after floor. He didn't want that. He wanted to build a farm. And so he asks for and is approved for his plan in the state of New York in 1907. In 1909, he gets the land in Thiels, New York, which would then go on to become Letchworth Village. Unfortunately, he dies before it's opened, but he does live long enough to know that it will carry his name. First admittance to Letchworth Village occurs on July 10th, 1911. So this is right after he died. He's passed away. Over 130 buildings in this compound, over 2,000 acres of land. Point of reference, most homeowners don't have a half of an acre. I shouldn't say most, but a lot of homeowners look at a half of an acre and that's a lot.
Right.
2,000 plus acres.
And I feel like we didn't see over 130 buildings when we went there.
We did not. Maybe we saw a handful. If we saw a dozen, we saw a lot.
Right.
But there's a reason for that. So let me talk to you now about that reason. So Letchworth Village. It is sectioned off. It was sectioned off between the children patients because 500 were their original number, give or take. And of that 500, about 350 were children. So you had children's sections. You had a male section and a female section. So much so that it was by design. You didn't want commingling between the sexes back then. And it was also by nature. And when I say by nature, I mean actual nature. Minisciango Creek cuts the grounds basically in half between male and female. So, I don't know if that was intentional when he bought the land, but it definitely worked out in their favor to do what they designed to do, which is to separate male and female. The current uses of the buildings, obviously, they're not. Letchworth Village was closed down in 1996, and we'll talk about why in a minute or two. But they have different sections, as I said. They had adult male, they had adult female, they had adult and female, male and female infirm sections. Okay, basically, you had categories of patients, and infirm would be people who could not work the land.
Right.
Okay. Now, working the land was part of the deal because it was a self-sustaining farm-like environment compound. For the most part, they tilled the land, they sold their produce, and that raised some funds. But they also would have things like they would make Christmas toys and sell those at Christmas time. So they were semi to mostly self-sustaining, if they hadn't hit their capacity, which we'll get to that in a minute. So, let me tell you about the current uses of these buildings. The adult male building, currently used by the township of Stony Point. So when we drove out from the actual location you're allowed to walk in, and it was daylight, we could see.
At that point, when
we were driving out, we see all these buildings in front of us, much better shape.
Right.
Look very similar to the ones we just saw, just much, much better shape. Well, those are because those are still being used as the offices and office-like administrative buildings of the township of Stony Point. So those are the adult male buildings. The adult infirm buildings have been turned into a golf course. I believe it's called Patriots Golf Course. It might have a different name. Patriots is definitely in the name. The female infirm buildings are still operated today by Hudson Valley Developmental Disability Services Office, or Hudson Valley DDSO, which basically serves very similar purpose. It's just much smaller amount of clientele, and only specific female infirm couldn't do jobs because of their conditions. The boys group and the administrative buildings were turned into a park by Haverstraw Township, and that's the grounds that you can walk on. Those are the grounds that you're allowed to legally walk on, which is where we were. And those buildings, as we can see in our video and as we saw, are in pretty bad shape.
Real bad shape.
Okay? Like, I wouldn't even wish a squatter to be staying there. I'd rather the squatter stay out in the open. It'd probably be safer than some of these buildings where the roofs look like they're going to collapse. And then, of course, there was that one big building where the roof was completely gone.
Which is the building we wanted to walk in.
So,
well, come to realize later, I think that was the hospital where we would have caught the juicy morgue, paranormal-esque feel to the stuff. Because the other buildings didn't feel that spooky.
No.
They just were like... Creepy.
Because, dark and decrepit and...
Yeah.
And, leaking from the ceiling kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't get no...
Spiritual.
Not once got any... It just felt like we were urban exploring.
Right. And then, that one building that we are talking about, that is the administrative building that you think had the morgue. It's really cool because when you watch the video, you see an actual tree, coming through the ground into the building. That is how much nature has reclaimed this part of the land. And then finally, I didn't touch on it yet, but the girls group. So when we went, we had the option to go left or go right. We didn't go right because it looked more well lit. It looked much more designed. Okay, and what that was is, I'm pretty sure, was the girls group, which is currently used as Fieldstone Middle School. So about 9 of those buildings that were there for the girls, young children, are currently still in use. So obviously they're going to be well kept. The lawns, the landscaping, the buildings, they're going to be well kept if you're housing current children for schooling. You can't put them in decrepit, decaying buildings. So even if they're over 100 years old, I've seen schools that are over 100 years old that are in better shape than some things that go up now.
So let's fast forward a little bit, because this is some stuff I feel like people do realize. Let's go right to where we know the first polio vaccine was administered there. Let's take a time jump in your notes to that. because that's very well documented and known. It's been on all this. What Letchworth Village has been on a lot of paranormal shows. It's been on Ghost Adventures, I believe, maybe Ghost Hunters. It's been featured on YouTube in a lot of videos. So everyone knows the first polio vaccine was given there, but a lot of these videos make it out to be like this really bad thing, almost like a lobotomy, which no lobotomies were done in Letchworth Village, which
Not according to my notes.
which is not in line with other haunted asylums, because other haunted asylums, a lot of bad things were done. Letchworth Village has a
history,
just
not that kind of history.
but not that kind of history. And most of these asylums, like Letchworth,
have
which you're
a
going
worse
to allude to, it starts off very good, gets overcrowded, short staff starts to get I
don't know. I think a lot of the times the staff gets the short shift on that, like they're intentionally doing it. It's just they're so overworked, understaffed. If you've got to serve 90 patients, you may, and don't butcher me for this, you may just forget one. You may forget.
That's the thing. I think the tensions became high, and that's what led to the history aspect of it becoming a very bad place to be.
Right.
So get to the polio, because we know that, but it's kind of misconstrued online.
Okay, so in 1948, one of the very first polio vaccines, one that I think is still the most prevalent one, developed by Hilary Kaprowski. At the time, regulations for human testing, not as what it is now, he tested on himself first. Okay? Then, Dr. George Jervis, the chief researcher of Letchworth, hears about this. He says, you know what? We need more validity. We need more reliability. We need to prove that this can be repeated. So come test it on my patients. Just like that. Because again, there's not regulations like there is now, right?
Now, who said they come test it? The lead doctor?
The lead researcher at Letchworth
Village.
Dr. George Jervis, right? So it says, come test it. So Kaprowski does. He goes, tested on 20 patients there. All children. The first patient was an 8-year-old. Now,
sounds bad.
It does sound bad.
But at that time,
again, regulations being what they were. You did mention lobotomies. Now, what else you will see, and I'll get right back to the polio in a second, is they did have in jars like formaldehyde brains of people who had passed away, but that is how scientific research is done. Nowadays, you have to volunteer to give your organs to science.
Right.
Back then, they could just take them from cadavers. But let me keep going with this polio. So 17 of the 20 children, patients that this was tested on, developed antibodies. 3 already had them naturally from the virus. And again, polio at the time, folks, this is like a death sentence. So the fact that there were no adverse effects, this is the phrase that I could never get right, adverse effects from the vaccine, and that 17 out of 20, so that's 85%, developed antibodies. Within 10 years, which is the normal lifespan of research, within 10 years, this is now in use in 4 continents.
wait, you're saying a vaccine usually is 10 years of research?
Yeah, you got to pay, you got to get money, you got to do the testing, you got to get more money. Yeah, usually.
Interesting.
Usually, because you got to, there's a whole lot of...
I don't know why I find that interesting.
Well, I do. But a whole lot of that 10 years is like begging for money. Like, the reason, obviously you have to do testing. You're supposed to do cycles of testing, not just 1 test or 2 tests. You're supposed to do cycles to prove, again, that it can be repeated, that it is valid. But most of the time when they're doing research for these things, they're begging for more money because they run out. All right? You have to pay your doctors. You have to pay for the combinations of the drugs you're putting together, what have you. You run out of money pretty quick. And most times they got to beg.
I'm always out of money.
Same here. So now it's in 4 continents, and as I said, I'm pretty certain this is the current one because even Mitch McConnell, one of our senators in United States Congress, had polio as a child and has had this vaccine.
Great senator.
So, as long as he doesn't freeze up on camera. But I'm not making fun of him because I think I'm not a doctor, but I think he's having strokes, and they're covering that he's having strokes.
Yeah. Possibly, but you'll never know.
No. I honestly think he's having, because my grandmother had them, they were called TIAs. There's these little mini strokes, or there's the, it's a specific kind of stroke where basically you look like you're awake, you just kind of freeze in place, which is what's happened to him a few times on camera.
Or he's just really old.
Could be that too.
Most of our politicians.
Yeah, well, there should be age limits, but that's a different story for a different day. Anyways, so it gets overcrowded early now, right? You mentioned that.
Right.
As we start to get overcrowded, this is where Letchworth starts to fall into problems. 10 years after it opens, it's already got 1,200 patients. Now, it's designed for 70 maximum per building, and it's designed for a total of, I believe, 3,000 patients, max. But by 10 years after it's opened, it's already got 1,200 patients.
Yeah,
it started with 500, and it's 2.5 times as many within 10 years.
No good.
No.
That's the recipe for most of the haunted asylums.
Right. So, and then by the 1940s, the conditions were bad, but unknown. Like, when I say bad, dirty areas, dirty eating areas, dirty living areas. The patients were unkempt. They weren't cleaned. The ones that couldn't clean themselves. Again, understaffed,
Can't imagine working there. Can you imagine what it smelled like? I worked at a hospital.
I mean, you know what? I feel like after a while the smell goes away because you get used to it.
Yeah, well, I can definitely speak to that.
I mean,
At my current job, I can definitely speak to that.
I worked. You know where I worked, and when we would use a particular kind of paint device, it's not paint; it was paint stripper almost. It was wood stripper. The first time you walk in, if you've never smelled this, you're like, "Oh my god!" I'd walk in, go up, we strip the wood. And then within 10 minutes, it's probably no good. I was probably inhaling chemicals I shouldn't.
Definitely. Explains a lot.
Maybe that's why my brain's so large and my hair fell out. But you get used to it. Yeah. It's just like even people who work forensics teams, they tell you not to put Vaseline here because it's better that you get used to it than get used to the smell of Vaseline.
I worked at a hospital for quite some time. And when I did work in the early years of this stint that I had there at the hospital, there were times I had to go through the psych ward to do a particular thing that I was
tasked with doing,
supposed to do at my job. And always in that part of the hospital, there was a very
distinct smell,
very particular smell. And I say I got used to it because I didn't go there often, but I knew that when I went there, this is what it was going to smell like. Smell different than the rest of the hospital, which all hospitals have this particular smell. Mm-hmm. But this section of the hospital, which happened to be the psych ward, had a very odd aroma to it.
And what's funny, right? You know, if you don't grow accustomed to it, or you grow accustomed to it and then it's removed. Like right now, it's been so long since I've worked with that wood stripper that if I smelled it, it would bring back memories because your olfactory sense brings back memories. But this is reminding me of a story Joey told recently in, I think, the Egyptian podcast, where we were just like digressing, and he told the story about when he worked at a bar and this guy came in that works with the horses in Central Park, and they knew when he was coming, the whole bar was going to smell like manure.
Right.
So like, yes, your mind tells you what it's going to smell like, but more so your senses that are outside of your thinking brain, they're just, reactionary, they're going to tell you to.
Yeah.
So anyways, we got off a little topic there, but so overcrowded. In the 1940s, when these conditions were getting bad, no one really knew until Irving Haberman shares some photos he takes. He's a photographer, shares some photos. There's public outcry, maybe in New York, maybe even in the Northeast, but nothing changes. Nothing. And we're going to the 1950s. Now there's over 4,000 patients. Now we're way past max capacity. Okay? And we haven't even been open. This facility has not been open 40 years, and it's past max capacity already. Okay? And we're talking about 2,000 acres of land. People are stuffed in. We did have an interview with a person who was a supervisor at one point, and said when they were maxed up, the bunks were basically so close to each other, you had to go over the footboard to get into the bed. As they closed, obviously more and more patients were removed.
Right.
You had more room, but these are terrible conditions. Again, nothing's really going on until 1972. But even before that, in that period between the 1950s and 1972, unnamed but quoted state representatives said that it's not just the facilities themselves that kind of neglected the patients, the families would as well. I mean, they would basically dump their relatives there that were, mentally unstable or mentally slower than, what would be considered baseline, right? So anybody who was considered to have mental deficiencies back then were left as like they were insane, which is unfortunate because having mental deficiencies does not mean you are insane. It just means you can't
do things for yourself.
Right. And that's not insanity. There's a difference, right? So, but unfortunately, at the time, that was a common practice. 1972 rolls around, and a known newsman, maybe locally he's known, but he's not as famous as he is now, Geraldo Rivera, puts out a report, Willowbrook, the Last Disgrace. Now, this is an expose that makes his career, because like I said, he was just a regular newsman up until now. He does a report, an expose on a Staten Island facility, much like Letchworth, both of which are kind of designed after Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's mansion.
Right.
And so you see the disrepair in Staten Island, you see the disrepair in Letchworth. This finally kicks up enough steam that over the next 20 years, 24, from 1972 to 1996, which when it's finally closed, Letchworth is starting to thin its patient herd and then finally close.
I heard Geraldo Rivera actually set up a date that he was going to come there, but he actually showed up early.
So it's not a date that he showed up early. He told them 12 o'clock. He showed up at 10 because he knew, and he said it to them. I think this is the same story that we read. You tell me.
No, this is what I heard from a history person who I had lunch with today. He said Geraldo Rivera had scheduled either a time or a date and showed up early. And when he got there, he already knew that things were going to be bad because obviously, what do you tell your kids for Santa Claus? Oh, Santa Claus is coming, be good.
Yeah, and don't wake up in the middle of the night.
Right, don't wake up in the middle of the night and make sure that you are in bed because he won't come. So you know what I'm saying? You're telling your kids. Right? So he knows that if he tells them, I'm going to be here at 12 o'clock, everything is going to be squeaky clean, perfect. Right. Nurses are going to have fresh scrubs on, the floors are going to be clean. Well, he didn't. And he got there early.
100% accurate.
And he saw what basically got him on the map. And
100% accurate.
Released the news, and that's what was basically the downfall, which was already a downfall, but which helped close Letchworth Village down in 1996.
That's a straight fact. So he did whatever the time. I'm going to use 12 o'clock so people can gather. Just do it real quick. At 10 a.m. he showed up with a full camera crew already ready to go because he knew that they would be told to clean up in advance of his coming. So he showed up 2 hours early and caught them all off guard.
And imagine that, 2 hours. It's not long. It's pretty close. And nothing was done.
Right.
And then Letchworth Village closes.
Correct.
And then come the ghost stories. Because how many people died at Letchworth Village, Nick?
Oh, over 800, 900 for sure. And there's almost that's only in old Letchworth Cemetery.
Right. So this leads us to, which in my opinion is some of the best evidence that I personally caught.
You've been doing this over 20 years. So
I've been doing this for a long time. And this recent expedition that we went on, the Nick and Billy Adventures, not to be confused with Chippendale Adventures or Chippendales.
Well, I think we could do Chippendales now.
Nah.
We could be up on stage.
You, yes, not me.
No, you for sure.
Well, listen.
Joey.
Yes.
Okay.
But no Diddy. Anyways, we found at the end, we went to Letchworth Village Cemetery, where presumably correct, 800 people were buried at this cemetery. And it's not close. We had to drive, get on a route, get off the route, go through a little...
I still don't know how there's 800 people.
Suburban area, very foresty.
Right, we almost missed it.
And we almost missed it. And then I backed up, pulled into a little, basically like clear area on the road.
Basically, it's not even nothing. It's not a parking lot. It's nothing.
It's just a clear spot.
It's like a shoulder.
And we walked into Letchworth Village Cemetery. And there's a monument there that Nick pointed out because Nick had on the job Nick's notes ready to go.
That's right.
And he was telling us about this monument where the names of the 800 souls that were buried there are on this mural because a majority of the graves they don't have headstones. The families were able to be called to the cemetery to place a headstone for their loved ones. A lot of them, unfortunately, as you said, did not come to do that.
Right. So almost all that are buried there are buried in pauper graves. Pauper graves have just a cross, a metal T. They're not even crosses. They're just T's. Metal T's designated with a number, coded. I'm sure the old staff probably knew what each code meant. Which patient was what code.
Like it says 32-1, right, something like that.
It's this person, but they long gone. And there were a few headstones there, but as you point out, the only way to get a headstone was on the family's own dollar. And as I said, most families were abandoning their people there.
So when we walked there, after we passed the memorial stone with the names
and the toys and the gifts,
and the toys that were placed there, because the townspeople there are the ones that go to show homage or, you know,
honor the dead. To make sure those are not forgotten.
Placing the toys and things, stones, pebbles with painting stuffs on it, paintings on little stones. We filmed that, and then we went to the cemetery. And I said, you know what, we didn't really do anything paranormal-esque except the SLS camera in one of the buildings. Let's do some spirit box. And we caught some substantial evidence. One of which I will play the reaction of what we caught. We ran the spirit box, and I had done it in a reel, and the reel basically is a shortened version so people could see exactly what we caught on camera, and I shortened it up, and this is the video right here. Here we go.
This episode. Stella. Hey. Addison? That's another name. Owen, that's another name. Yep. Find Owen? Do you want us to find Owen? Owen, Stella, and Addison. You remember those names? We found it. So one of the names on the spirit box was Addison. Addison Frazier is on the... Owen. No way, man. The spirit... Oh, dude, that's how you can debunk the spirit box. It is legit. Owen, we didn't check these names.
We took a
we took a quick look, and then we used the spirit box, and we got Addison and Owen in the same row. Look. Where is it? Addison Frazier. And then where's Owen? Right here. Owen Miller in the same row. No way, dude.
I don't think there's a Stella in the same row.
All right, so that's 2 of the 3. All right, if we find Stella, the spirit box just gave us 3 names over there that are on this that we did not check. 100%, we filmed it. We passed by it. That is crazy. Oh, Stella.
Stella Aiello.
So that was a clip, and I'll pop that up on the YouTube video so you guys can see it. That was a clip where 3 random names popped up on the spirit box, and they were very uncommon names. Stella, Addison, and Owen. Very uncommon names, not like John, Nick, Mike. Very uncommon. And something we did just yesterday, and I'm going to do it live.
I just did it with ChatGPT.
Okay, so we just did ChatGPT. I
asked it this specific question. What are the odds of getting 3 names defined as uncommon from a fully functional spirit box? Now, I'm not going to read all the math to you. I'm just going to read the final numbers because you can see, look how long I would have to be reading.
I did some serious math equations that I would end up in summer school for.
The probability of getting exactly 3 uncommon names out of 800 total names, with each name having a 5% chance of being uncommon, now it is uncommon, is approximately 0.0000011 or 11 thousandths. Sorry, 11, that's 100th, or 11 thousandths, not thousand, 11 thousandths of a percent.
That's crazy.
Not 1/10 of a percent, not 100th of a percent, 1,000th of a percent.
So for those, which my brother was one of them, he's like, I should have used their actual spirit box. Listen, there's a lot of celebrities on TV. Jack Osbourne, I've seen him use his phone in an app that use these ghost hunting features on a phone because the app is made by fellow ghost hunters. This feature wasn't the spirit box that was used. It was a feature within the app where you can ask questions and the text message appears on your phone screen and actually verbally says it. Now, if you watch the video, Stella, Owen, and Addison weren't the only things said to us. The app said tattoos. Nick and I have tattoos. It said witch and mystical, which whatever was there trying to communicate with us was probably looking at us because they passed away in a time period where obviously phones and tattoos were not a thing. Tattoos were a thing. Not very common, but they were a thing.
I just sent you that photo. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think you could post this. This is what I just sent you.
I will post that. I was going to
post that
yes.
part. I mean, I could send you the whole thing.
No, I will post that. Actually, I'll make that pop up when you're reading it. Do some video magic.
Okay. Just figured you'd want to see that.
If everything else cooperates.
Well,
so far.
We'll see.
Anyways, astronomical numbers there for that to happen. And the app was legit. And we used it. And for that to make 3 random names come up upon other things that were said to us is pretty significant.
Right. At one point, I thought I heard your name. I thought I heard my name. But those were more like the adult sounds. Then when we started hearing those names, those weren't even really that we heard.
When you thought you heard my name and your name, that was the spirit box. Then I switched over to the other feature that's in the app,
where you can see
where we could see the words coming through, and that is what we got. And it was substantial evidence. And again, and I'm very honest with a lot of things, especially as of late. Letchworth Village, where we walked, which was the male side.
The boys.
And we did one big circle because we ended up seeing the same building, which was the building we should have went in from the front. We went there and when we first started in the dark, and we peeked in. And had we known that was the bigger building with all the stuff that you see on YouTube, we would have went in.
Right.
But we didn't. We didn't know that, and it was dark still. I'm not saying that we were scared. It was just, we just got there. I was like, let's not get in trouble. And then we got here.
Right.
Technically, you're not allowed in the buildings. I'm willingly saying it. We went in the buildings because the door was wide open. We adventured. We explored. Did we do anything illegal? Well, we broke the rule of going in the buildings, but did we do what other people have done in there, which is pretty evident? Vandalism?
No vandalism.
No, we didn't do that. We respected.
All we did was
research purposes,
right.
Like the Ghostbusters in Part 2. Ghostbusters 2, they dug in the street.
And we didn't even do that. We touched nothing.
Yo. Egon.
That's right.
Right.
Do, re.
No, I mean, he went.
I know.
The Con Ed scene, he goes,
Yo.
Anyways.
But do, re, Egon. That's my favorite part.
That was the best scene in all the movies. In totality. That was the best scene.
I was going to send you something. Speaking of Ghostbusters, I had a key ring break, and I started straightening it. I'm like, I'm going to send this to Billy and go, look, I had a part of a slinky, but I straightened it.
But we had some good stuff, and it was a letdown. What I was getting at is, I'm very brutally honest, and walking around there was fun. It was nice. The weather was perfect. A little underdressed. It felt like the fall already.
Right. I mean, I think the temperature was perfect. Had I known it was going to be as cold as it was, I definitely would have wore long sleeves. Beautiful temperature.
Yeah.
50s to 60s, I could deal with all year round. Wasn't expecting it. I was expecting warmer than that.
It was also the day after the super blue moon that we had. But underwhelming. Didn't get any scary, crazy vibes. There was one part of the video.
Well, there was that one building we wouldn't go in.
Joey has to send us that hat figure he said he saw. I have to text him that. But I did think I saw something pass by one of the windows. My wife said it might have been because the way the camera was panning that it looked like that. I have to send you that and show you that scene. But underwhelming there in the actual grounds. But at the cemetery, pretty substantial stuff. So if you haven't seen the video, again, under this video, if you scroll down a couple of slots past the shorts, you'll see the Letchworth Village. The Swab podcast goes to Letchworth Village. And a lot of exploring in the beginning. The last 25 to 30 minutes of the video is where the good stuff was caught if you want to fast forward. I don't take offense to that. We just wanted to show everybody what the grounds look like in detail as Nick gave some of his notes.